What's up, you guys? My name is Gabriel Rocha. I coach the mental game. And if you guys are coming here after watching the first video, first off, I just want to say thank you. It got way more traction than I was actually expecting. I think at this point, it's only been like 4 days. It's got close to 100 views. I think I got like 25 new subscribers, which is a huge deal to me, at least. You know, starting up a YouTube channel and putting out some of these longer form type of videos where it's really just me expanding on some of these ideas is really encouraging to see. And while the analytics are cool, I really want to focus on, you know, just putting out good quality, valuable information for you guys. And so that's what we're here for. Last episode, we talked about building up a performance persona and creating this mask that you can really use to embody high performance. And today, the next topic is actually one that's near and dear to my heart, something that I really harp on with my mental performance clients. And it talks about just being really focused on the process and staying away from, you know, just viewing the outcomes that you really don't have much control over as like the main focus. Now, that's not to say we don't want to win. Hell, I want you all to win. If you're here, you're probably looking for ways to get better. And so hopefully what we're going to be talking about today can help you get a little bit better and make your process more enjoyable overall. And so the theme for today is actually one that I got from another mental performance coach who does really good work in this space. His name is Drake Davis. You should follow him on Instagram. He puts out great work, Sip Drake. And one thing that he talks about is utterly dedicated, utterly detached. And so when we start to break down what does that phrase actually mean, we want to make sure that we're dedicated to the process while staying detached from the outcome. And that is something that is much easier said than done, because at the end of the day, like I said, we all want to win, right? None of us want to lose, but at the end of the day, it's very easy to just focus on the numbers, the analytics, the outcomes. What are the judges saying? What are the referees saying, etc. And I think that one of the most poignant examples that we see, at least in the world of sports today, on being utterly dedicated to the process and being utterly detached is no other than the GOAT himself, Roger Federer. And so what I read the other day is that Roger Federer has competed in 1,526 matches overall, singles, roughly. And if I were to ask you guys, like, how many of those matches do you think he won? All right, I'll give you guys a second. Just come up with a number in your head. He won about 80% of his games. So he won about 1,251 out of 1,526. And so you're probably thinking to yourself, like, damn, he won 80% of all of the singles matches that he played. There's a reason why he's the GOAT. Now, if you were to guess, how many of the total points within all of those matches do you think he won based on a percentage? You'd probably guess that's probably close to like that 80% mark, right? Wrong. Roger Federer on average won 54% of the points that he played. And you're probably thinking, well, that math doesn't really add up. How do you only win 54% of your points, but you win 80% of the matches? And that's where we start getting into this idea of critical points. And so for Roger Federer, his success was predicated on winning lots of critical points consistently, not just overall points. And now, when we look at sports in the highest level, we all know perfection is impossible, yet we somehow try to hold ourselves to this perfectionistic standard, knowing that we're going to fall short, and yet we still hold ourselves to that standard anyways. And that can cause a lot of internal distress, especially over time. When all you're thinking about is being perfect, you don't give yourself any room to fall short of that perfection. It can make the process a lot less enjoyable, especially when you're only focused on the outcome. Now, when we look at Roger Federer and those critical points, as I started to look more into the data, I actually saw that when we're talking about the break points that he won, which are those critical points, he actually saved about 67% of those break points. So whenever he was playing one of those break points, there's only a 1/3 chance that you were going to beat him on a break point if you were ahead. Now, when we flip it around, how many of those critical points or those break points did he actually win? He won about 41% of them, which tells you, you won about 2/5, right? Which is not that much greater than like the 1/3 that he lost. But you have to also recognize, like, he won 2/3 of the break points that he was defending, and he won 2/5 of the break points that he was trying to win to get ahead. And so we break it down. How does he actually do that? Well, technique, obviously. Strategy, obviously. There's a reason why he's the GOAT. But the mechanics alone aren't the reason why he wins those break points at a much higher clip than the competitors he's playing against. And so the way that he kind of broke it down was that he just focuses on one point at a time. Every single point that you play demands the utmost attention. And so that means that when you play a bad point, you don't ruminate on it and then let that affect the next point that's going to happen. And you also don't focus on future points or match outcome. So one thing you don't want to do is say, oh man, well, I lost this point, and then you start doing math in your head and thinking, well, if I lose the next point, well, then he's going to be on a break point, and then I have to save that, because then that takes you out of the present moment. And so when Roger Federer kind of breaks down his process on how he would keep the focus on just one point at a time, every single point is its own performance. He talks about how he would self-regulate before every single point. And the reason why he does that is because that allows him to let go of the previous result from the point before, and it also frees him from thinking about the future points and doing some of that math in his head. Now, some simple resets that you guys can all use within your own performances. Something simple, right? Take a deep breath, using some sort of mental cue to call your attention back to the present moment. So ones that I actually like to use with either some of my clients or even some of the pilots that I've worked with is just be where your feet are, right? A physical cue that I also use with my pilots when they start getting anxious, when they're sitting in the cockpit and they're flying in formation, they're less than 10 feet apart, wingtip to wingtip from the other aircraft as they're flying in formation and doing all these aerobatic maneuvers. What I want them to do before they actually get into formation, because they have a stress response, and when you have a stress response, your body tends to bias towards gross muscle movements, and so it makes it really hard to make those fine muscle movement inputs, whether it's adding only a few percent of power, changing your bank angle just a couple of degrees, etc. I would have them wiggle their fingers or wiggle their toes, right? And the reason why that works is because it stimulates your brain back into fine muscle movement, and that reminds your brain, hey, we need to relax a little bit, right? Another great one I would do is deep breath, relax the shoulders, right? Because when you're relaxed, you're able to fly more effectively. You're able to have control over those fine muscle movements and be able to be in command of the aircraft, in command of your decision making. You're more emotionally regulated. You're much more physiologically regulated as well. Now, when we start looking at, okay, what is the link to bodybuilding with utterly dedicated and utterly detached, right? So you look at bodybuilders, we're a weird bunch, right? And every single one of us, we get on stage with the goal to win. We don't always all win, right? Even some of the best in the world didn't always win. Even Ronnie Coleman took 16th at the Olympia, right? Phil Heath lost Olympias. Jay Cutler, the best in the world, all lost. And so what we want to do in terms of staying dedicated to the process but staying detached from the outcome, we link that back to the training, right? And that's a really good place to start. And so when we talk about dedication to process during training but detachment from outcome, a lot of us use a logbook or some form of way to track our progress in the gym, track our progress in training. And for a lot of us, we have an emotional attachment to training. We always want to make a progression in some way, shape, or form, whether it's through number of reps, through the load, through tempo, right? There's tons of ways to make progressions. But what we know as human beings is logically, we're not always going to make a progression every single time we step in the weight room. Now, for some people, they go into that weight room seeking that perfection. I'm going to progress every single set of every single session. We know that's not going to happen, right? If it was, we'd be out here, bench pressing 1,300 pounds and leg pressing 2,000 pounds and just continuously getting more and more progress every single session. But we know it's not true. And so what you need to do then is focus on just the controllables. And so what I actually have some of my athletes and some of my clients do who participate in bodybuilding and trying to keep that process focus on the training is, if they are using a logbook, I will have them do, the normal, write down your exercise, you write down the load that you're using, the weight, you write down the number of reps you did, and then you also add in 2 more columns next to that. And the 2 columns I have them add in are effort and execution. And the reason why I have them do that is because those are 2 variables that you will always have control over. You can control whether you gave a 10 out of 10 effort. You can control whether your execution on a certain exercise is a 10 out of 10. So I'll have them use some sort of scale. It could be, 1 out of 5, 1 out of 10, 1 out of 100, depending on how specific they want to be. And when you are going into every session, your goal should be, I want to get a 10 out of 10 for effort on every set and a 10 out of 10 for execution on every set. Because logically, I know I'm not going to take a progression every single time I step in the gym. And so then what I'm doing is I'm diverting my attention away from the outcome, which is the number of reps or the weight, to something that is controllable, which is the process. And that process leads us back to effort and execution. And so part of that process is also having the self-awareness to understand what your needs are. And so when we think about creating a type of psychological environment to win the critical sets the same way that Roger Federer would win the critical points, part of that is going to be a self-identification process of, what do I need in order to make this set the best possible set that it can be, despite the load and despite the number of reps that I'm using. And so different sets are going to have different types of demands. So if I'm doing a max effort set of deadlifts, the psychological environment that I'm trying to put myself into or experience in that moment is probably going to be different than like a max burnout set of bicep curls or lateral raises. And so one of the things that I also talk about with some of my athletes is using the eyes off scale to better identify what those conditions need to look like. So the eyes off stands for individual zone of optimal functioning. And so basically the way you want to look at it is, for any sort of task that you're going to be engaging in, there's an optimal level of physiological arousal that you want to be experiencing in order to complete that task to the best of your ability, both in terms of focus, in terms of how hyped up you need to be. So for instance, if I were to hand you this booklet right here, my journal, and say, hey, I just want you to read through this journal. And if you were to think about on a scale of 1 to 10, a 1 being, I'm about to fall asleep, a 10 being, I'm having a full-on adrenaline dump right now, you probably want to be somewhere between like a 3 and a 6 for most people to do that task at an optimal level. Now, that is going to change depending on the task and also depending on the individual, which is why it's the individual zone of optimal functioning, right? So for instance, if I'm going to get myself psychologically ready to do a max effort set of deadlifts, for me personally, I probably want to be right around like a 7.5 or an 8. Some people, they want to be closer to a 9. They want to be really hyped up. Some people, they're thinking to themselves, I want to be a little more calm. I want to be around a 6. And so different exercises are going to have different demands in terms of what you specifically need for that set. And so once you can identify, hey, I'm currently experiencing about like a 5. I'm a little tired today, but I know I have this max effort set of deadlifts or max effort set of squats or leg press. And I like to operate around like an 8. Then the goal becomes, okay, what can I do to get myself to that psychological level to then be able to max perform in that specific task? And so for some people, it's going to be a specific type of music they listen to. Some people, it's going to be a specific, like a reel that they might listen to. I've got tons of Jordan Peters reels and edits that I like to listen to before I do a max effort set of squats. So with all of that being said, you then want to judge your set based on Was I able to get myself where I needed to be in terms of being able to perform? So could I create the psychological environment for myself to go max perform that set? Using the eyes off scale as an easy tool to identify that. And then also, did I get as close to a 10 out of 10 on the two things that I have full control over, which are effort and execution? That's the utterly dedicated to the process part, the things that I can actually control. And then the utter detachment from the outcomes then becomes, can I look at that logbook even on weeks where I don't take a load or a rep progression, but choose to focus on the fact that I got a 10 out of 10 on effort and a 10 out of 10 on execution, and recognize that, hey, that was one of the critical sets. I won the critical set. And even though I might not have taken, from an analytical standpoint, a progression in the traditional sense, I still created an effective stimulus. Thus, the workout itself was effective and gets me closer to my goals. And that's what I want people to walk away from every single session. Because if you're maxing out effort and you're maxing out execution, you are going to compound progress over a long period of time, no matter what. As long as you're also dialing in the other variables, like eating your food, recovering, right? I'm implying that those things are already taken care of. But if you can walk into the gym every single day, utterly dedicated to the process of the things that you have full control over, and utterly detached from the outcomes, the load, the reps, etc., you're going to put yourself in a much better environment to then be able to focus on the process and stay away from trying to focus only on the outcomes, which you're not going to have full control over every time. We're not going to take a progression every single session, but you can still make progress by being very, very consistent through the controllables. So that's my main message today to you guys. Stay utterly dedicated, stay utterly detached. I'll catch you guys on the next one.